All right, let's start with the photo. This appears in the New York Times. It looks like it might be from a freight elevator, maybe from the sort of atmospherics here, but you can see the caption there. Workers from the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, preparing to enter the offices of the U.S. African Development Foundation after U.S. Marshals opened the doors on Thursday afternoon. The New York Times and other places reporting on the kids from DOGE being let into this tiny federal agency that they had previously tried unsuccessfully to get into. They tried on Wednesday to get in, and the agency wouldn't let them in. They came back Thursday, and they were let into the agency by U.S. Marshals who opened the doors for them. Once inside, they reportedly changed the locks. So presumably behind those locked doors, they could go about the business of trying to dismantle that agency and fire everyone in it. Same basic story from the Washington Post, reporting that the DOGE kids showed up, quote, with 5 U.S. Marshals. The Post reporting that the people who work at that agency, they were warned by colleagues who were having lunch nearby who saw the DOGE kids coming, warned that the DOGE guys were on the way with U.S. Marshals. The staffers then used the stairs, not the elevator, to get out of the building. They slipped out that way. They left their belongings behind, quote, to avoid a confrontation with DOGE and the U.S. Marshals. So this is a very dramatic story, right, about a tiny agency created by Congress. Legally, only Congress has the authority to shut them down. Trump is trying to shut them down anyway, trying to use this DOGE entity that is under the control of his top campaign donor to do it. Maybe. They don't explain themselves much, but it seems like that's what they're doing. At this tiny agency, the staffers there tried to hold the line and keep operating as an agency by essentially keeping the doors closed, while the DOGE guys tried to muscle their way in, pounded on the door and said, let us in. Here's what I want to know, though. When those DOGE kids came back the second day, they came back on Thursday, and according to all the press reports, U.S. Marshals let them in the building. Was it U.S. Marshals? I mean, who is that in the elevator with the DOGE kids, really? We have reason to question whether the men reported as U.S. Marshals, now in multiple press accounts, are actually U.S. Marshals in the usual sense. We asked the Department of Justice about it, since the Marshals are part of DOJ. DOJ told us, quote, we are not making a statement at this time. We do request that you please verify with your sources to ensure your reporting would be accurate. We absolutely are trying. It would help a lot if you guys would answer the question. Are those U.S. Marshals? That said, while that sort of unsettling detail remains outstanding, while we literally cannot tell who it is that's showing up apparently armed to let DOGE staffers into locked doors that legally they may not be allowed to be in, while that remains unsettled, but this question of who is the armed escort for what DOGE is trying to do. The Justice Department appears to be conducting another one of their Friday night purges of career officials, firings at Main Justice in Washington, D.C. tonight and at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan. 2 prosecutors from the corruption case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams were placed on administrative leave tonight. Reporting from NBC News indicates that in Manhattan, those prosecutors were walked out of the building by U.S. Marshals. Joining us now is Ryan Riley, NBC News Justice reporter. Ryan, thanks very much for being here. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
This is a question that ultimately will have a simple answer. While it remains outstanding, I will admit to being a little unnerved. DOGE is involved in actions that a lot of people in government agencies say are not legal. This small agency that they tried very hard to get into and ultimately succeeded in getting into today said that they did not have the authority to come inside their offices, that Congress was the only entity that could dissolve this agency or fire its members. Nevertheless, DOGE was able to summon some sort of muscle, some sort of force to force them into that building physically, despite the fact that the agency told them no, they couldn't come in. Do you have any sense of who that muscle was or how we could find out?
Yeah, normally that's something that we would be able to find out from the Department of Justice, but I think there's so much chaos, and I really just can't underscore the amount of chaos that's happening inside DOJ at this moment. You not only had those prosecutors who were pushed out, you not only had these leadership changes that are being instituted today at DOJ, but you also have people going after individual, line attorneys who made critical comments of U.S. Attorney Ed Martin on social media. Right, there's people who are now have been placed on administrative leave because of that. So, this force, the U.S. Marshals, is typically something that, follows judicial orders, or there's a process for, or they're following, that sort of procedure. They also have this critical role in protecting judges. So the idea that, actual U.S. Marshals were being sort of summoned by DOJ to go behind the scenes would be a big deal, but we just don't have the evidence to suggest right now that they are indeed U.S. Marshals. There's nothing from the government saying affirmatively that these were indeed Marshals. We just don't really have that reporting, and I think because of all of this just enormous level of chaos, it's really difficult to get straight answers out of the Department of Justice at the moment. And there's so many people behind the scenes, I think, who are really worried about speaking out and talking to reporters just about what's going on there, because they're worried about the consequences that will have for them. Typically, being a federal government employee, you have some level of security, and even though it was difficult to get sources to talk to you, that people weren't worried about just being instantly kicked out for any contact whatsoever, or for sort of various reasons, or because someone has a grudge against them. And that has sort of been thrown out the window in the last few weeks. People are really afraid for their jobs, and there's certainly folks who are speaking out, and I appreciate every single one of them who's contacting me over Signal or what have you. But it's a really chaotic situation inside the Justice Department right now, and not a lot of certainty about what's going to happen next.
Yeah, a chaotic situation in terms of the firings, a chaotic situation in terms of obviously some of the ethics and the ethical and legal issues happening, but also impossible to get straight answers as to the use of force inside the U.S. government, one part of the government against another. This is very unsettling stuff, and I know you're on it, Ryan. I know that if anybody's going to be able to figure it out, you will. Ryan Riley, NBC News Justice reporter, thanks for working so hard on these stories. It's such a tough time, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.